object-oriented analysis and design are really foundational to most programming languages these days. But too often we blow by what it means to think in objects as we teach, especially new programmers, about these languages and what it means to build object-oriented software. So right now, I'm not trying to teach you everything there is. It's going to be months, maybe years before you really understand the full nuance of everything objects can do and how to appropriately design them. But let's just start with this really simple idea of how do you think in terms of objects as opposed to maybe other ways you've learned to think about code. So when we think about software, if you're starting a program from nothing, how do you make stuff happen? Well, all too often you get this idea you can just say stuff like, let there be light. And magically, with no explanation, there's light. We don't know how it happened. We don't know where it came from. We don't know who did the work. We just say something and it somehow happens. There's just mystical features and functions that are out there that we can do it. But, well, let's deal with reality. Let's deal with a more realistic solution. So a more realistic solution is I don't say let there be light. I have to go around the room until I find a light switch. I have to have some idea that I can produce light, and I have to find the place where the light starts, and I go to the switch and I flip the switch, and then there's light. The lamp turns on. So the first notion in thinking in objects is to move away from the idea that either there exists or you need to create some function or feature that is just kind of universal and global, some sort of magic of the world, and start instead of thinking in terms of the objects that help you do things. If you want light, you light a match, you burn a candle, you start a campfire, you create electricity and figure out how to make light bulbs. And so we can take this sort of system, instead of just having a function saying light, we can create the different objects of the real world that are part of this sequence. So in this case, we can say, hey, well, there's a light switch somewhere, and that's connected to some socket probably, which is then the lamp is plugged into. And so when I flip the switch, instead of just magically light appearing, I can work through that sequence of the switch provides a voltage to the socket, and then the lamp, as long as its switch is flipped on, will then be able to show light. So this is a little bit of an abstract example, but I hope that it sets this mindset of moving away from magic formula that might seem what programming is built as, and maybe how you think in your experience so far, how people come up with these really complicated problems. And instead of think of how can we look at the real world and model that in software to make these things happen. So let's take something really simple, kind of like let there be light, printing here. So before you've learned about objects, perhaps, you had statements like this, print, hello. Um, there's kind of a magic call that's out there. This is very common in Python and early C and many different programming languages. Print is foundational. Let there be light. Let there be hello world, right? So what does that look like in the object-oriented world? Well, across many languages, you've seen this in a variety of ways. So if you're a C programmer, you've maybe seen this cout object. And this is the object that represents where text goes into the outside system. And then you have the little pipe here that takes hello and pushes it to cout. Or if you're from a Java background, you have system.out. Well, out is an object. Out is an object that's stored in this system class that allows you to redirect your print line to the out, as opposed to a file or the network or other places it could go. And then even in the Python world, you have this notion of a string object that you can then call a format method on, and you can add in and replace and do work on that string. So there's objects even when you maybe haven't seen them before. So the first key to thinking in objects is thinking in terms of not functionality, but of where does that functionality come from? So when you want to do something or when you want to build something, think of what is the thing you would go and ask that has that data or can do the work that you want to. You want light? Well, don't think in terms of the result, the light. Think in terms of the lamp. Think in terms of the candle, the campfire, and how do I work towards that? And so that's a really key starting point that I want you to start thinking of as we talk about where objects come from, how they work, and how to build and design using objects.